Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of WANA Live, the reading series of the Writers Association of Northern Appalachia. I'm your host, Damian Dressick, and here's your other host,
Christina Fasonic. It's nice to see you this evening, Damian, and we will be introducing our audience to a number of writers from the region. So you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here this evening?
I do. As many of you know, we in December lost Pittsburgh teacher and poet Jeff Oakes to after a battle with cancer, and he was such an important figure in the world of Pittsburgh writing that we wanted to give members of the community a chance to celebrate his life and his work. He inspired many people with his writing and his teaching and his presence at the University of Pittsburgh. I can remember starting at Pitt as a graduate student in the early 90s, and Jeff was one of the first people I met, and he attempted almost successfully to teach me how to use a photocopier. So that was one of my first interactions with anybody at Pitt.
Almost.
And I believe Jeff was had been on WANA Live and gave a wonderful reading as well. Christina, do you want to say a little bit more about Jeff and his?
Yes, that was my first encounter with Jeff. I met him when he came on the show, and I was immediately struck by not just his poetry, but his art was so incredible. I think many people got to know him based on his amazing artwork as well as his reading. And so just to give everybody a refresher, or if you didn't know Jeff or know his work, he was the author of 2 books of poetry, The Things, which came out in 2022, and Like What, which came out in 2019, both from Lily Poetry Review Books. His poetry and essays appeared in lots of different literary journals and in the anthology Brief Encounters, a collection of contemporary nonfiction, and My Diva, 65 Gay Men on the Women Who Inspire Them. And I think that last bit, it makes me think about the lineup for tonight's reading. The vast majority of people in this reading are women, and I think that says a lot about who Jeff was and his ability to mentor women. And I got to know him through his Facebook comments and talking to him in chat, and he will be missed. So shall we begin this reading? I believe you have a poem of his you'd like to read, right?
I do. And if you heard my dog barking, it wasn't part of the sound effects, but I'm going to read Jeff's poem, Even in Pittsburgh, which is partially because we have dogs that look almost from a photograph relatively identical.
Okay, I'm going to disappear and let you do that, okay?
Thank you. Just before we go to bed every night, the sound of the dog lapping out of his big silver dish in the kitchen becomes a body hauling itself after a long night swimming in the ocean on to a strange shore. A shipwreck's sunken weight behind him somewhere darkly grinding sand into further dissolves. I take the black leash from the top of the refrigerator and clip it to his collar. We walk down to the end of the block, the lot abandoned to weeds where he pees a long, thoughtful moment. Tonight's full moon, Earth's old inoculation scar, our constant, otherwise floods the street. It's a light with a weight that makes the sound of someone else in the room. At home, I turn off the lights, knowing the house all the way through, preferring it that way sometimes. Turn all the locks. The dog follows me with a glow-in-the-dark ball in his mouth. It's like a joke he's been waiting to spring on me, and which I can't figure out until I hear his tail wagging him up the stairs. I rub my eyes like a sailor signing a contract. We strip to skin and fur, climb back into the sails.
Hi, everybody. Um, I There's so much to say about Jeff. Um, I miss him, and I wanted to read something that I interviewed him several years ago, maybe 2019, and I asked him, now that you have a first book, this was after the things came out. Has that changed the way you feel about writing and publishing? And this is short, but I really speaks to the spirit of Jeff. Um, and he replied, he said, quite a few friends who'd already published books told me, with a degree of sympathy, that getting a book out doesn't really change your life, by which they meant none of them got rich. None of them got better jobs. None of them levitated or could suddenly jump tall buildings or stop bullets with their teeth. But they were wrong. It did change my life, by which I mean my feeling of my life. The production of a book is a production. It's a proof that all those years writing and revising and sending things out and giving readings added up to something tangible. I was happier about my life for having produced a book. It is an achievement, even if it's not the kind of achievement that grants me the power to lift cars over my head. It gave me hope and a feeling of pride. It is a celebration. I'm in the Library of Congress, which is something. There's a record I was here on Earth. And yes, it's not all I'm grateful for or all that my life has been worth, but it is a real joy to have a book, and especially right now. Joy is important. And I'm going to read his poem, Saint Wrench, which is from the things. Saint Wrench, 1. The more you see a thing, the less you see it. The more it quiets into a minor character, an unnamed member of the Greek chorus as it turns and counterturns while you soliloquize in the bathroom over the broken toilet seat about your own helplessness. Your own face alights on itself as the bowl refills, sighs, stops quivering. Here is the moment a hero is made, you think. 2. It is possible to imagine that the name of Christ written in the sand by the first nervous devotees was not a fish, but a wrench, a single form drop forged, capable of removing bent nails from good wood, of turning suddenly the water back on after days of drought and renovation. 3. In the wrench's slippery eye, the universe revolves around the earth. It doesn't recognize Galileo's cosmology as weight bearing. A wrench dreams of holding and being held, of being the instrument by which things are made to turn until everything is adjusted. It doesn't sing, it makes a minor silver clink. Opened, it's Hathor, the old moon goddess, her glittering horns. 4. Each face is made up of a pair of minor faces, one that angles up, one that looks down its nose. Forced together, they grow hungry for something to talk about. They will latch onto anything. Your fingernails, for instance, your teeth, anything to make you start.
Oh,
Oh, hi. I first met Jeff at AWP about 30 years ago when it was in Philadelphia. And he was my dear friend and poetry heart. I'm thinking about Andy and of Jeff, who spoke to me about Anubis weighing his heart against a peacock feather when I last saw him in Pittsburgh. The black dog in the middle of the night. Sometimes the black dog wakes you up in the middle of the night. Sometimes the dog is Anubis. Sometimes he's just your dog. Sometimes you know something's wrong. There's a terrible retching sound at the end of the bed. Sometimes You just feel him looking at you, a physical thing, like a voice, and you say his name in the darkness. Because in the old days, there was a dark God who came to guide you down to the place of judgment. There, your heart would be weighed against an ostrich feather on the scales of the law in the kingdom of death. Anubis, the guardian of the dead and of orphans. Anubis, son of the sea and the underground. Anubis, the last face you see, if your heart weighs more than the law, before you are devoured by Ammit, who bursts sometimes as a crocodile, sometimes as a hippo, whatever you most fear, out of hell's burning lake. The house is dark, and there is no noise from the street. You still have not fixed that broken stair, but you know how to step over it by now. You remember where the leash was, and sure enough, there it is again. A tail bangs into you. It's your dog, and not Anubis. You still have not oiled the hinges on the front door. It's hard not to think it must sound to the neighbors like a man coming out of a tomb. The dog pulls you down to the abandoned lot where soon new foundations will be dug, upon which new houses are planned for the well-off. The black dog walks out into the new March grass and pisses there. You look at the stars, find the two planets in the news, forget which is which, burning brightly as if in love. Not a single car drives by. You think, well, if this is my last walk, I think I've done good work in the world. I haven't damaged anyone intentionally. The black dogs I've lived with, if asked for witnesses, would not turn on me. Then a car passes, and whatever death it was you were preparing yourself for lifts. The dog just wanted to pee. You say to yourself, get a grip. Stop being so willing to die. Good God, aren't you a strange one? And you think, tomorrow I'll finally go to the store and buy some WD-40 and make that creek disappear. In the dark house, you find the treats on the counter and give one to the dog who eats it fast. He's hungrier than you expected. It may be why he woke you up. He knows the ritual of the dog who deserves to be given something good in the night. Quickly after, he jumps back onto the bed and his breathing slows, leaving you to stare out at the quiet neighborhood, wondering where your need to self-mythologize has led. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Jan. It's good to see you. I'm reading Having Given Up, which was a short nonfiction or prose essay or flash or uncategorizable piece of Jeff's that appeared in Fourth Genre in 2019. Having given up. Having given up salt, I took up pepper. Having given up sugar, I took up sadness again, like an old coat filled with stones. Having given up on losing weight, I took up getting lost. Having given up on desire, I took up with strangers who were grateful to be touched. Having given up on my fellow citizens, I took up disappointment I'm finding hard to swallow. Having given up speaking, I took up black ink, square brushes, thick white paper. I have taken up the spill, having given up the signature. Having given up on my name, I took up a middle-aged and respectful invisibility. Or do I mean I entered it? I'm not sure, having given up caring. Having given up the joy of being a child of the living, I have taken up the responsibility of being a child of the dead. Having given up on beauty, I took up a collection of baseball caps.
What lips my lips have kissed, I've given up over knowing again, ever knowing again. But I have taken up cup after cup of water by moonlight. I have given up intention and taken up the scribble, acknowledging the accidents of my birth. I have given up jump of youth and taken up with the quiet black dog who snores. I will not give up that dog, even to you, death. Some days he is all I owe to the earth. I have given up my death to see where else might be taken. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Jeff was a very dear friend and colleague and an inspiration, also a total crack up. I'm going to read After Grief from The Things. After grief. There's an end to waiting, but not right yet. Let me sit here in the quiet a little bit more, waiting for something other than breath to move inside me, other than hunger, other than thirst. There will be an end, but first I need to wait. Eventually, I will get up from here and begin, get dressed, make breakfast, take the dog out, get to work. It won't take long, but for now, I need to stay quiet, like a tourist listening for new sounds outside the window, inside my own mind. Finding myself in a strange bed and slowly reciting to myself the few words I know in the strange language I will have to use.
When I was first teaching at the University of Pittsburgh, long time ago, Jeff was my student. And like all graduate students, he was not well off, as he says. He was broke. At that time, even I was broke. And I saw him one day in the hall, and he was carrying a hardback elegant book by Philip Larkin that had just been published. And as I looked at it, I realized, so this was a very pricey book. And as I looked at it, I realized he had dog-eared all these pages. And I said, Jeff, why did you dog-ear the pages? And he said, these are the dog ears of love. And I realize that right now in his book, The Things, I have a dog ear of love to spring. Every day I walk the dog beside the river twice. Every day, whether the river is green or blue or brown, whether it's high or low, every day, whether there are herons or geese or only the sound of river ice grinding against shore ice, a sizzle that shivers ice shards like flames around the seam. Every day I come home and drink water out of a large white mug I bought in a hardware store one day near Hampstead Heath, right after I'd seen Keats's house with its propped up ancient plum tree outside, his death mask, the handwritten copy of "O Bright Star" in his Shakespeare. The truth is, I went there because, except for Two Autumn, I hadn't liked him much and hoped seeing his house would light a little sympathy in me for all his sighing and moaning, all the strange men groaning about nightingales and old jars, dead nights and distant curls. I think buying the large plain white mug was my response. I wanted something simple out of which to drink clear water. It might have been something Keats never got to do, I think now. God knows what had to be done then to get clean water. Never mind the clear, the simple. He came to his simplicity late for my taste. But sometimes I too feel o'er-brimmed, watching the Allegheny push its tonnages downstream, a mix of branches, mud, poison ivy, a wood duck slipping out of its man-made box, the kids tagging their names in spray paint on the gigantic pillars of the 40th Street Bridge. It flashes past. Life flashed past Keats and all that crew, listening to their teeth rot and their breathing grow pockmarked, bloody as Indian paintbrush. Here near the river grow large purple clover. Bumblebees grapple like adolescents at nipples. Once by accident, not truth or beauty, I found enough morels to fill a doggy bag. I took them home and washed them until they were the color of the moon. Then I sliced them in half and in butter fried them. I ate them happily. I washed their sweet flesh down with clear water from that plain mug I bought for almost nothing elsewhere. I told no one. Who else did I need?
Oh my goodness. Thanks, Lynn. Thank you, WANA, for doing this. My name's Noah. I met Jeff Oakes in the late 20th century when we were very young. And one of the things that stands out most in my memory of first meeting Jeff is going to the back room at Hemingway's for a reading. And it was in the first semester that I met Jeff at Pitt that I was invited to go listen. And he read this poem, and it has continued to stay with me ever since. It's called Men in Bathrooms. Men in bathrooms notice and say little. In gas stations and restaurants, they lean forward toward the urinals, wait and wait, feeling awkward before it starts. I've heard some men run through multiplication tables in their heads in order to relax. One man I knew got to 17 times 9 before he could let go. By then, 3 men had gone and left, and new men had taken their places. Even the men behind the stall doors are nervous about farting out loud. They're nervous about who's counting the number of times they pull and tear off sheets of toilet paper. The roller always thunders in their ears. Who will they have to look at, and who will look at them when they come out? Above, the ventilators roll like drums at a duel, but there is a general agreement to silence. No one looks like they're looking. No one will say what he saw or who he heard mumbling numbers under his breath while he waited. Even the men who only wash their hands and who glance quickly at the backs of the odd-stanced men at the urinals, hoping for a moment alone with themselves, are treated kindly. No one asks why. They only wash their hands, hands which are never dirty or dirtied. Quietly, the rages and shames crash all through the cleanness and the pretense, the not knowing what is happening. Men in bathrooms know more than what they remember, things that cannot be washed or hidden away, that we are muck and water, simple knowledge we keep returning to, and that we have fallen in love with that shiver of recognition, even in the glittering skyscrapers of blessed emptiness. Thanks.
Hello. Wow, it's hard to follow that, Noah. Jeff was a friend, and he was my first friend in Pittsburgh. And I was connected to him through Liz All, who's on this reading too. And he taught me so much about pleasure and failure, and about beginning again and again in one's notebook, but also in relationships. And so I'm going to share a favorite by Jeff called Mistakes with Strangers, and it's from Little What. I pulled down a man's pants in public once. I had said, "I love you" earlier, and I had meant it. Don't ask me why. 2 men later, I was him, betrayed. I pulled off the next man's wings in return, and I found out he went on to own and run a large company that manufactured shoes so beautiful you had to buy them, but so heavy they were impossible to lift. Some people died. Help me, Rhonda. Jesus is not coming for me. I stopped returning his calls. His wounds made a boring centerpiece for conversation. He kept asking me to stick my finger in them all the time. The next man stuck me with a $300 sex line phone bill and vanished. I liked his thick body that was like an ice cream cone I could not lick away. Later, I was told he was a professional ice cream cone, whatever flavor you wanted, at the corner of 6th and Wood downtown. So I paid. One man I stuck with a 3-year depression, well, he said, that required a therapist, 2 women chiropractors, 3 new jobs, and 4 other lovers before it lifted. Later, he thanked me for being so cool. One man I left handcuffed to a bed since he was always nicer, unsatisfied. Once, I tried an orgy, but found myself thinking in the middle of it all, this. We're a pack of lions clawing, eating, roaring over the body of a crippled zebra, which is also us. Then I fell in love with the least pushy of the bunch and acted as if he alone meant anything. We fell off the bed to be alone. I saw him again only twice more, since it required an 8-hour drive and I was poor. After the second time, he decided he had to write a poem right then and put my clothes back on. And I put my clothes back on and sat on his screened-in porch. Crickets, katydids, big furry brown moths came to cling on the screens. I examined their armored, hairy undersides with cocktail toothpicks while his typewriter clattered. What was the meaning of such machinery? Cats howled and screamed. The poem went on for hours, it seemed, and turned out only to be a letter to his mother, who he said was crazy. I apologized and took the next bus home. The next week, I was paying for a therapist, looking for a personal trainer I wouldn't fall in love with. That was a mistake, too, since it meant I had only myself to impress, and that trick never works. Once, I slept with a man right after his wife died. He said it was her last wish. Once, a man promised to make me a star. Once, a man drove his brand new car directly toward a tree to see if I'd flinch or scream, which is how he recognized care. I said I'd welcome death and groped his crotch. He turned away. I had late-night dates with another man who turned out to look exactly like my father when he was 25 in a photo I never saw, thank God, until years later. I'd meet him in his shower at precisely 10 o'clock. For a while, I pretended to be the plumber who needed to check out his pipes. After that wore off, we'd usually end up sitting together on the shower floor while hot water rained down. We'd sit there and admire our feet getting cleaner and cleaner near the drain. Usually he'd be drunk before I even got there and want to talk about his first lover's suicide. When I wouldn't agree to tie him up and then punch him until he fell asleep, well, that was that. He yelled faggot at me from a car once while I was walking on the street. Once I slept with a man who was kind but not attractive at all, just to see if I could make what I thought was the right choice. Forget running with scissors or dropping pennies off the Empire State Building or swimming right after lunch. There was only had to had it with. One man I nearly killed myself over, I ended up laughing about. Another I laughed at then, now I miss, like the best goddamn dog I ever knew, who I could tell anything to, who listened even though he could never help me, which did help in the end. I was ordering drinks on a plane to Europe when he got put down. Sometimes I still feel his big, warm weight beside me in the night and turn toward it before I think, oh, right. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I met Jeff when I was starting grad school, and I was in a workshop. Lynn Emanuel bravely held a full-length manuscript workshop. That was like, I don't know. I mean, if the poetry has the equivalent to the Jerry Springer show, this could be it. It was a great workshop, Lynn. But that's when I first met Jeff. He had long hair. Over the years, he's just become, I don't know. I mean, I a brother figure, but also a father figure. I just have always admired him. I still ask myself all the time, what would Jeff do? And it's hard to believe that he's not here. And I want to believe that he somehow is. The poem I chose to read is from Little What, and it's called The Equipage. And I was in a writing group with him, and I still remember him reading this after we wrote to the prompt. And it was just one of those seamless things. It just was amazing. And I think he even knew then and said that he thought this poem was helping him settle things with Keats. And Lynn read that poem about his ambivalence about Keats. The Equipage. That there are bees in my azaleas, despite the news of hives collapsing. Begin again. Branches of hot pink feathers, fistfuls of fluted champagne, each a barn door open for the horse's return. Inside, the smell of oats, of sugar waiting. Let winter be over, the careful tethering of hope. No room for tears among these Shriners in their tiny circling vehicles. The bees are in the dresses of the desperate debutantes, hearing bells, imagining candles lit for Easter, each orange shrine a miracle. Meanwhile, a tiny map of Pittsburgh etching itself inside them, a dance to return with. Among the white and green pantaloons of the blueberry bushes, a nudge will open, a tongue will flash forward. So the oranges grow, the peach fuzz depends on, the cherries sing about before they harden. So during a time of war, the heart finds a strange mercy still, a tiny hat, a gold coat full of messages. Sunglassed, humming, their mouths complicated with pins, forks, kazoos, full of implements, these hungry priestesses imitate the bear that would eat them, that shakes them off, that steals their drunk. They rise to plumb the morning glories, to answer riddle with cone. Like tiny cattle, they beat the fleshy silks into batter. They fall upon them like rain, their transistors turned up full for the carrying on, away, begin again. Bring wheelbarrows for the hell of it. It rubs off. Bring the horses to harness. unwrap the footmen.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here in this virtual space with so many friends and loved ones of Jeff. I'm Shannon. I was the co-director of undergraduate studies with Jeff at Pitt for the writing program. Only for almost a semester, we got to share that role. But I knew him as a faculty member and an MFA student before then. So he was a mentor as well as a co-director with me. And I was thinking about so many of my interactions with Jeff were when about very kind of like ordinary things, like our offices happened to be next to each other. So we would often be talking like while one of us had keys out, or one of us was putting on a coat, or one of us was leaving, going to get water, making tea or something like that. And I noticed that he uses ordinary day motifs within his work as well. So I wanted to read something of his that paid tribute to that. So this is a little piece. I don't think it's quite a poem, a little prose poem maybe, called Honey. Honey. I don't buy it so much to use as to display it in the kitchen near the tea kettle, where it warms the corner like a miniature sun or a rhyming dictionary. In the middle of the night, I sometimes sneak downstairs, unscrew the cap, slip a spoon out of the drawer, and put a spoonful of that impossible product of 100 lives, 1,000 flowers, 1,000,000 pounds of light and heat and rainfall quietly into my mouth and swallow. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Liz All, and I met Jeff in 1992 when I started the MFA program at Pitt. And I'm thinking this evening of his tremendous, joyful, capacious imagination. For about 8 years, I made chapbooks, and Jeff let me make a chapbook of his work. It's called The Moon of Books, and I'm going to read the title poem from The Moon of Books. The Moon of Books. The moon of books comes on like ours at night, though dark days sometimes bring it out. We don't know whether the books are afraid of the light or if they're simply accustomed to it now. They bask in it, are occasionally transported out of their everyday shoulder-to-shoulder pressure into relief, not to be holding everyone else up. Instead, to be held, opened, their pages gently fingered, the words rising to the paper surface, to have what is inside unread, read outward into distances. If the books feel us reading, the humming of our fingertips, then their night air must be lovely, readers moving from word to word like bees. Like us, they must have stories about the light that wakes them up out of their law and order and returns them home again and then goes out. I have heard there's a kind of book despair in which one too long unread suddenly falls from the shelf to see if anyone exists or cares. Sometimes they make a silent pact and a whole shelf will collapse like a train wreck, or they will slip one by one like seals into the ocean, onto the floor. There they lie, a mound of bodies, waiting for something to happen, as unable to know how much they are loved as they are unable to understand whether the language inside them has any meaning, until the hands come and smooth back bent pages, grossly creased covers. Heal us, they say. Tell us why we've been standing here so long. What's our purpose? Sometimes at night, a few books disappear. No one seems to know where they go. For a time, the shelves sigh in relief, but always new books come crowding, stealing all of the old spaces and the chances for air, and that moonlight where one is chosen and opened at last. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. So wonderful to hear all of these poems read aloud. I love the line that Lynn Emanuel just gave us tonight about these are the dog ears of love. So I'm gonna, this one is one that is dog eared in my book. It's from Little What. It's called The Mouse. A heart as small as, an eye as black and alive, an impossible leaf print of a foot. Large sensitive ears, just as, against the house, settling, or the furnace kicking on, or the refrigerator's ice supply refilling, or the knock of the washing machine's water. Those feet made of rice grain, of the chaff of rice, as small. For months, there was this stir at the corner of my eyes. I'd turn, and it would be nothing. Maybe the guy next door died or something. I thought a ghost, as if a pigeon flew between the sunlight and the back window again. I blinked the startle away. Then one day I opened the drawer full of silverware, the pills of its waist like lint, the midden I'd become. I held my breath and my heart began to pound, down among the pipes and centipedes, nights at the light click. It runs right into a crack and through. As a thief, if the space is safe enough, in the dim light of the middle of my life, as I am making decisions about what to do. Thank you.
Hey folks, really an honor to be reading with all of you as a former student of Jeff's and colleague at Pitt for just a little bit. I'm honored to, walk in his footsteps in some ways. I recall, how much honesty and vulnerability was not only a part of what he expected from our poems, but ultimately what he wrote about himself. And so I thought the poem "How We Lived" really struck me as just a poem that really embodies both those things. Again and again, we drove into the night to find a place where no one could find us. Over and over, we parked in the darkness, practiced being nothing but breathing, fog on the windows instead of our faces. We sat sometimes a long time, listening, our two dogs in the back seat, settled into waiting. One night, something was wrong with my mother's right elbow. Another night, something kept her hand from making a fist. Something gone rose-colored, a throbbing pain she kept to herself. Some nights when her left hand let loose the steering wheel, its knuckles were snow. When she opened the door, the dome light was a headache, another slap. I opened my door, the seatbelt reeled back in its elastic. We were no one to know. We hoped no one would see us check in for one night with two dogs and no tent. How we signed in, her with a broken hand, bruises on her arm, unable to write. I don't remember. No one asked. Somebody always took our money and let us stay in a spot where a family's supposed to go. Instead, we unfolded the back seat into a bed, climbed in and slept. The dogs folded themselves around us. In the morning, we drove back to the house we escaped. I shifted the stick when she said, "Now," heard her grunt of pain around each lurch. "Remember what we've had to do," she said when her breath returned. "Remember all of this." Thank you, folks.
It was very difficult for me to pick one work, and I chose the poem "Begin," and it is from Mistakes with Strangers. Mystery who wanders the basement, mystery who kicks at the screen, mystery whose cowbells mean something is close to appearing, to appearance. Earth, silence, open, don't keep shutting or turning mysterious. Refuse to be Rome, Jerusalem, Babylon, those stones. Struggle forward toward me. There is someone here, waiting, not angry. Is it even lonely? Similarly restless? Maybe not even me either, watching the windows. Tickled the wind chimes, wander the lawn. Perhaps turn near the patio where someone, not even me exactly, has left a full mug of tea, sweet, milky, not even steaming anymore. No one knows why. No here, at least. The phone didn't ring. I wasn't hungry. Nothing like the dog howling at the mailman. No neighbor needing help. I just stood up, but not me necessarily, and I went back to my life to find it missing. Or maybe it was me then. Mystery knock. The laundry can go on being uninhabited. There is vodka in the freezer so cold it might make a voice tangible, easier. Sit down, take off your windbreaker.
Well, I and Christina, I think I speak for both of us. We would like to, very much to thank our readers for sharing Jeff's work this evening. It was very powerful and affecting. So thank you all, Nancy, Jan, Catherine, Barbara, Noah, Lynn, Jenny, Ellen, Shannon, Liz and Ann, Fred. Thank you so much for making time to celebrate Jeff's work, and thank you all for
We
watching.
have one more.
Okay,
Jane's here.
Okay, great.
All right, we'll pop off and she'll come back on.
The poem I'm reading is Sunflower. We don't have a very good name for what weakens the shell, cracks it open, makes us step out into the light. First bees with their powdered legs, then small sparrows who rain down the seed silvers over the sidewalk. Why stand out here staring at the great flower grown in a pot I nearly threw away? It has a kind of stature, for all its luck I might say I lack. Although I'm here, right? Watching small birds remove each seed with the cunning of jewelers.
with all the courage to continue, without a name for any of the things they don't have. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody.
I'm glad Jane made it in.
And thank you, Jane.
Thank you all, everyone who read tonight, and all of our viewers. Lots of people were on this broadcast, and I think it goes without saying, thank you, Jeff, for all the words. Good night, everybody.
Night. We'll